And today I'm thrilled to welcome Tim Lineaweaver, a dedicated writer and advocate in the fields of addiction, trauma, and recovery. So, through his articles and personal journey, Tim is empowering others to face life's toughest battles with resilience and self-compassion. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you for everything that you do in breaking down the stigmas around addiction and mental health. It's an absolute honor to have you on my show.
Well, it's an honor to be here, and thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, amazing. So, what actually sparked your journey into addiction and recovery advocacy?
Well, it's really started personally, and it started way back in my family life. I grew up in a beautiful area on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, near the ocean, and it was kind of a bucolic, beautiful setting, but things inside the house were dark. My father had been, I think, traumatized by his father, and he developed addictions, I think, pretty young. His primary addiction was to alcohol, but also phenobarbital and other substances. He was a writer, a very intelligent guy. He was kind of charismatic and funny, and but he had a ton of rage. He was very self-destructive, and he was verbally abusive. And also, at times, he would be physically abusive, and at other times, he would also be self-destructive in really bloody ways that seemed out of context, like that we wouldn't see it coming. So we had sort of this always on guard, anxious feeling in the house, and so I grew up with very poor self-esteem, a lot of trauma issues, as you might imagine. I was depressed and anxious a lot, and I really struggled with self-esteem. My brother, who's just a little bit older than me by a year, was kind of precocious and funny and entertaining, and he was an academic star. And personally, at least in those days, I hated school. It made me very anxious. And for me, it felt more like a place to fail than a place to succeed. And so I felt very alienated and sort of adrift and bereft growing up through my teens. And when I was about 12, so quite young, I started to smoke cigarettes. And then later on in that year, before my 13th birthday, I drank for the first time. And that uh, feeling sort of banished all those underlying trauma related issues for the moment, in terms of just making me feel a little happier, a little more connected to other people, able to talk a little bit, to laugh. And it was really wonderful at first. And of course, as you may guess, it led to other major problems later on.
Very interesting. Wow. It does sound like a journey. And yeah,
Yeah.
I could already see the common kind of patterns here.
Mhm.
Number one is the fact that, your very own role model figure, had this addiction. And so, it's just very common for children to be picking up on that, right? Instantly. I always say it, if there's like a parent who smokes, then, how likely are the children to ca carry on that as well? So I just think like, especially when they start off with alcohol, then prescription drugs seem to be very common in America.
Yep.
I don't think it's that common in the UK, to be honest. I think it's more the kind of like the class A drugs here. But yeah, and so what happened then? How did you actually manage to transform your life?
Well, I think the probably the quickest way to describe that is I grew up, I became much more deeply involved in alcohol use and cocaine, and I surrounded myself with other like-minded people. I got very involved with using cocaine, selling cocaine.
Mhm.
And then eventually I started to smoke cocaine, which is a very much more direct and addictive way to take the drug. It was to me, it was instantly addictive. And of course, alcohol was sort of this friend that was always there with me. And so my use increased quite a bit, and it sort of subsumed my life. Um, and at 28, I had gone through a bunch of money. I became estranged from my first wife and daughter. I lost that marriage, lost custody for a while. The IRS came after me because I didn't pay any taxes. And it was sort of like scorched earth. And one day, my it's sort of a funny story, kind of, but my father-in-law, who was a very kind of buckled up guy, and he was a scientist, high-powered scientist, very bright, charismatic, good-looking guy, came up to me and he said, "I hear you have a drug problem." And I was frightened. I was like, "Oh my God, I
Oh,
can't lie to this guy." And
mhm.
I kind of just said, "Yes." And he thrust a piece of paper at me, and it had three names and three phone numbers, no information. And he said, "Here, call one of these people." And I was like, well, okay, I will. And I called the middle one, and it was this wonderful, empathetic, non-judgmental, very loving, but also very kind of firm. She was just perfect for me. And I saw her for about 6 months. I continued to drink a little bit and use a little bit, and I was trying to remain sober, but I was trying to do it in my own way, which wasn't quite enough. And anyway, after a couple more incidences, one, I went to my daughter's christening and got very drunk and was absolutely mortified by my behavior. And I woke up the next morning, and the first thing I did is called her on the phone. I said, "Get me to treatment. I need help." And so I went to a program. I spent 30 days there and kind of started to feel a little more hopeful. Um, Started to kind of figure it out a little bit. I was scared to go home because I knew all the temptations, but I was really motivated. I had lost my self-respect, really, and my dignity. I had lost the self-respect of a lot of other people. I had all this underlying trauma stuff. Another trauma I had, just to mention briefly, is I was sexually abused when I was really young. I was 7 or 8 years old by a, a, a family friend, as it turns out, who was he himself being sexually abused. So it was a big mess there. So all these underlying things, and I had to kind of face them. And I came out of treatment. I did therapy once a week. I did group therapy, which was wonderful for me and really helped me to deal with those trauma issues. And I went to a lot of self-help groups. I went to a lot of AA and NA, and I kind of found a new community of people. And I felt pretty well supported. The first year was really a rock fight. It was really hard.
Mhm.
Um, I felt, like I wanted to use a lot. My body kind of was so used to self-medication. My body was, and my brain were screaming for it. And
Okay.
but the other side of me, the recovering side of me, was like, no, we're not going to do that. We can't do that anymore. And after about a year, it really kind of lightened up, and life got a little bit better. And so that happened at age 28. And when I was 30, I had been a bartender for most of my life up until that point. And obviously, that was not a good profession for me to be in. So I realized I needed to go back to school. And I was terrified, like, oh my God, school. No, do we have really?
Yeah.
But So it was I spent 9 out of the next 10 years working full time, my daughter on weekends, and going to school pretty much full time. And so I did undergraduate, then graduate school, and then I got into the addictions field after that.
Wow, what a journey. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you know what I find fascinating is that it took you like a year. You still had your the demons calling out, for these substances. What do you think it was like when you had your demons there and you had your angels there, telling you no, stick to this. What do you think was it, what helped you during those times? Because I know that for a lot of addicts, those are the times that they will just give in.
Yeah. Well, I think I developed the a couple things. One is support. It was just such a key thing. I found out pretty early on, luckily, Tim, you're not going to do this alone, buddy. You need other people, right? And but you need the right people, and you need to put yourself around the right people. And even today, I remind myself of that because I think, who we're with says so much about us, and how we're doing. So um, therapy was also a key element, and group therapy was a really key element in all that. Getting support at meetings was a big part of that, and I really wanted to have a good functional life. I was kind of determined for that. And one of the things that I really wanted more than anything else was to have a happy family life. And the divorce and the separation from my daughter was really painful time as well. And I went through that in recovery. And I think when I was about 8 years sober, I met my second wife.
Oh,
And this is kind of trite, but love really heals trauma. When you find somebody that
I know.
really cares about you, you really care about them, they're willing to hang in there with you, and that's been a real blessing for me as well. Have
Yeah.
a nice family, you know. So that was a key element, I think, going forward too.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's such an important point because I know that so many people who I speak to, support is a real major thing where they just don't have the right people around them to support them, and it's obviously people who are still judging them and they're just
Yes.
not really, they don't have their best intentions at heart. And yeah, so I just feel like it's so important to have those people. So where would you kind of recommend that people go and find these people?
Well, that's a great question. And I think for different people in different areas, there may be different answers. But one thing that I realized pretty much right off the rip was I couldn't be with my old using friends. And many of them, I grew up in a pretty small town, right? So I knew all those guys really well, and I was close to a lot of them, but they were still doing the things that I was trying not to do. So I couldn't be around them. So I felt a little isolated at first, and I realized if I want to do this, I need to find a community. And self-help was one place where within like 2 months of my sobriety, I met a friend at a meeting and we became close. I got a sponsor. I met a lot of other people in the process of doing group therapy. If those things, most places have some AA, and if you're really looking for community, that's not a bad place to go. If you have sober friends, if you have sober family, make use of those people. Um, and I think also develop a support team, who is really in your corner in the way that you need them to be. Meaning that so for me, this will sound a little dramatic, but just to give you an idea, for me, if somebody knows that I'm in recovery and they challenge that, or if they offer me alcohol or drugs, to me that's like they're putting a gun to my head because it's essential that I remain sober. It's the foundation for everything that I've tried to build in my life. And I know that, if I pick up again, that that foundation can be washed away very quickly and I can lose a lot. So I really stay far away from any temptation. And I try to spend all my time with people that understand me as a recovering person and support that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, that's really good to hear. And so would it be an issue then if you were out for dinner and they had like obviously wine at hand like they do at dinners, big dinners. So I suppose, you just won't even touch it, will you? Because yeah.
I'm fine. My wife has a glass of wine at night, and I don't. It doesn't trigger me or bother me or anything. And if it did, I would tell her, and I know that she would respect my wishes with that.
Brilliant.
Um, and I same thing. If we go out with other people, if they want to have a glass of wine or a beer, I that's fine. Uh,
Yeah.
as long as they're not, trying to get me to drink. Like, oh, come on, you can have one. No, I can't. Leave me alone. Um, Another thing that bothers me, I think, is when people start to get intoxicated, and it just sort of creates an irritability and also an anxiety. And I think that's left over from my father. And when I experience that, usually I just kind of say, "Hey, I gotta go home. I'll have a nice night," and off I go. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm the same because again, as a trauma survivor in my youths, I was getting intoxicated just as a form of escapism. So now, I just feel like later on in my years, if I see people my age, wanting to go to those extents, I do always question and think, what is the matter? What have you not dealt with? And so I do always feel like there's an underlying issue as to why they need to get in that state.
Right. And I think we had mentioned stigma earlier. And I think that stigma is a real problem for people with trauma, with people, excuse me, with addictions. Um, and I think a lot of times we sort of judge somebody who has an addiction, but we probably don't know what's lying underneath that addiction. And
Exactly.
usually there's almost, I don't know, a high percentage of the time there's a trauma driving that. And I think if we could, as a society and as communities and individuals, find more compassion and help for people and intervene earlier, I think that would go a long way to at least helping the problem.
Very true, yeah. So how do you feel your personal experience has actually shaped your approach to writing about mental health?
That's a great question. I try to, I guess I would say, explain myself well. Um, there's a word, alexithymia, and it's spelled Alex. I think it's Ithymia. It's a Greek word, from what I understand, and it means it translates roughly to no words for feelings. And I think a lot of trauma survivors and people with addictions suffer from that. And I know that I did coming up. Like I would feel all these this sort of knot of feelings and issues and problems, but I always felt like it was almost like my jaw was wired shut. And so how does one kind of break through that and start to develop the emotional vocabulary? So in the memoir and in the articles I write, I talk about that. I recently wrote a three-part series on the consequences of trauma, and I believe that the consequences of trauma are depression, anxiety, rage. alienation, disconnection, I could go on and on, alexithymia. And then another consequence of trauma is that we often self-medicate it, and then that turns into an addiction. Now we've got a bunch of major problems going on. So what I'm trying to do is to put readers who might not understand that experience into it so that they can understand it better, and maybe develop more compassion for others. And for people that have had the experience, I'm sort of like saying, hey, you know how this goes, right? And so it's that's kind of the trick of it to me, is to really put people into the experience. And I try to not just share the kind of the technical aspects of addiction, but also, hey, here's what happened with me.
Mm.
Maybe you can relate to this when you were going through your addictions or dealing with your trauma issues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And you've also written about the intersection of physical health with mental well-being. So how do these both play a role in addiction recovery?
Well, that when I was even before I got sober, I started to run a little bit. And then when I got sober, I started to run a lot. And then after a while, I continued to run. I started to skip rope. I boxed for a while as a master's boxer, participated in some tournaments, retired last year after getting a concussion, but I've done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And at one point, so exercise always has meant a lot to me. And when I run, sometimes I feel freer, safer, kind of more joyous. Sometimes it's painful, but I'm still like, oh, this is great. Um, and I then I came across a not just one study, but a whole slew of studies. And the basic thing that they found in these studies was 120 minutes per week of moderate cardio exercise is as effective as any medication you may take for depression and anxiety. Now that's
Wow.
pretty amazing, right?
Mm.
And I I kind of suspected that, but it was great to see it kind of on paper and really studied. And for me, exercise for the past 40 years has been um, it's the most reliable way I know of feeling better. Okay. So I can think of maybe a couple times when I exercised and I felt worse afterwards, but I was not feeling well and I was being too obsessional about it. Almost always I feel, I was kind of in a bad mood before this. I was irritable. I was a little down. I've had a rough day. But you know what? I feel pretty good now. And I just noticed how effective that was. And so I think for recovering people, and you don't have to run a marathon, you don't have to take up a martial art, you don't, it just a brisk walk, 30 minutes, 4 times a week, and you're going to feel better. Move your body, it really helps.
It does, yeah, absolutely. And even just like little things, like they just kind of purchase a rebounder and just, bounce up and down for
Yep.
like 5 minutes.
Anything,
Yeah, just to
anything. Yeah.
move the body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it
Mm.
really makes a huge difference. And then I think that there's other things. There's like uh, good nutrition. Sleep, I think, is another key thing for recovering people and both trauma and addictions. Um, it's probably various from one person to the next. I find that if I get 7 hours, I'm pretty good.
Mm.
8, though, even better. Um, and what I try to do, and I mean this emotionally more than physically, although both, but I try to think, what do I need to do in terms of taking care of myself to present the best version of myself on a daily basis. And by that I mean, the kindest, most patient, less irritable version of myself. Well, I need to get some exercise. I need to eat, decently well. I'm not saying don't cheat and have fun with food. That's fine. um, and um, and getting enough sleep. And if I do that on a regular basis, I'm pretty calm, pretty patient, and pretty kind. And when I don't, I can become irritable, and it just doesn't feel right, you know? So
No, absolutely, yeah. And how are you with like do you take any kind of supplements or
I
anything?
take vitamin C. I There's another thing that I take for it sort of supports your muscles. Creatine. It's not a steroid or anything like that. I'm really careful about what I take and don't take. And a couple other supplements, they just sort of support working out. And I should, I should also probably say that I also take some medications
Oh,
for my depression and anxiety. They're non-addictive medications, they're non-narcotic. They're to help me with anxiety, depression, and also sleep because pre-medication, I never slept well, and that was a byproduct of my trauma issues. I would just my motor would be too high, my brain would be kind of racy, and I
yeah.
was a light sleeper. And if anybody made a noise in the house, I'd kind of wake up. And with these medications, I sleep much better.
They give you calming. Yeah, and and obviously, some people are pro medication, some people might be against it. But
Yeah,
at the end of the day, if there's something like in your brain that, the medicine will benefit, then yes,
yeah.
so
And
be it.
as a therapist, I don't push medication hard at people, but say, for example, I might be working with somebody for a year and they're really struggling with their depression and it hasn't really gotten better through the therapeutic process. I might suggest, have you tried medication? Some people struggle to get on a medication and they have side effects. Other people, they don't. Some people, it's somewhere in between, but it can be a reasonable trade for people and it can make a huge difference. Doesn't always. So, but I also don't like pound on people about it. Like you have to be on medication. It's a personal decision.
Yeah, yeah. And also, so to just go back to the exercise, because
Yeah.
like, would you say power training has its mental benefits as well?
By what do you mean by strength? And
Strength training,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely it does. I do strength and conditioning. Actually have a coach that I love, and I've been working with him for 10 years, and we do various types of things. Some of it's strength, some of it is cardio conditioning. We do HIIT training, high interval intensity training. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah.
It's something that I hate on the one hand, but love on the other hand because it's enormously challenging to do from a cardiovascular perspective. But afterwards, I feel like I'm the calmest guy in the world, and
Yeah.
I sleep like a baby at night. Just wonderful.
Mm.
It's just hard to do, but yeah. So, and I think strength training is important, and maybe it's even more important as we age because
Mm.
we start to lose some muscle, and
Yeah,
it's good to kind of stay on top of that.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it is, I think I did read somewhere that, that they did do studies that, as soon as you hit 40, then you need to start strength training.
Yep.
So yeah, oh, fantastic. So can you share any common misconceptions about recovery that you've encountered?
Um, yeah, well, there's some stuff that I've heard both as a recovering person and as a therapist, um, and they're kind of pet peeves. One thing you'll hear about sometimes is, well, addicts and alcoholics, they never change,
Ah,
and
mm,
I think a lot of times people say that because they've had somebody in their life or their family who didn't change. And so that's their experience. But what they're doing is they're globalizing that. And I think that's also kind of a stigma thing as well. And so I try not to get mad, and I try to say, well, that's not true. If you read the statistics, and if you look in places, you will see that many people recover and go on to lead really meaningful lives in recovery. Um, the other thing that I've actually heard this in sessions is, which always makes me wonder, why are you here? But therapy doesn't work. And I'm like, why are you telling me this? Um, and I know that, from my own experience and from the experience of people that I've been blessed to help over the years, that it does work. Uh, but people have these kind of very rigid thought processes about it. And I think, the other thing that I do try to do as a therapist is I try to give people, um, I try to make it practical, not mystical or kind of, out there. I try to make it practical and something that people can really dig into.
Oh,
Um,
amazing. Yeah. And yeah, I did want to ask because obviously, addiction can go as far as kind of shopping addiction and not,
yeah.
phone addiction. So at what point would you say that someone should start to worry uh, about their addictions? If their addictions not that are not harming people, but yeah, they might still be addictions, and so at what point would you say that, that someone out there should actually start to question if this is causing an issue for them?
Well, is it adversely affecting your life in some way? Um, so is it affecting an important relationship? Is it getting in the way of your day in, day out functioning at work or as a parent or in school or what have you? And do you feel compelled to be dishonest in order to protect your addiction? That's often a telltale sign.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like, myself as an example, I was probably in early stage alcoholism by the time I was in my late teens because I had started so young. And even then, I was having adverse experiences because of my drinking, and I was getting in the way of me going to work, and I was being dishonest. And I also lost relationships because of it. So all those are telltale signs that, maybe it's time to find some help or to stop the addiction somehow.
Yeah. And so let's just say somebody knows that they might have an addiction, but they don't know what to do. What would be your advice?
Um, I have a resource page on my website, and there's a couple of links to the let's see if I can say this without getting it messed up. The Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration
Okay.
um, has a treatment locator. And so you can click on that link and then you enter, I think, your area code, and then it'll put out a bunch of treatment possibilities. That's one thing you can do. You can always try to find a local meeting. People in meetings are always really well versed about what's out there and what might be helpful to you. Um, you can also, primary care physicians are often well versed in knowing what the local resources might be. So there's a lot of different entry points.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I feel like it's definitely a start. And I can obviously add in your website, to this podcast for anyone out there who, may be looking for some resources to start with right now. And yeah, can you share some insights into your book in progress?
Well, um, It's let's see. I'm the title of the book is Blasted, and that refers both to the verbal abuse I suffered, which I found to be very disfiguring, and it also references my experiences as an addict and alcoholic. And it really covers my life up until after I got sober and married my wife. So it's that's the span of life. So it's like the first 35 years of my life. And it goes through all the challenges of being traumatized as a child and carrying that into adulthood, self-medicating, and then getting sober. And I would be thrilled if people were to read it and come away with some of their own encouragement for getting clean and sober and dealing with their trauma. That's what I'm trying. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah. And so when do you think that will be released?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm still kind of in the process of developing a book proposal, query letter, all those different things. Uh, and I'm building platforms, so that's part of the process as well. So I'm hoping to find a publisher maybe in the next year or so, within a year, not a year from now, but as I go through the process. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Yeah. Best of luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And lovely. So how can my listeners find you to keep updated with your progress?
Well, the best thing would be to go to my website. It's free and anybody can subscribe and have full access to it. There's probably 30 different posts on all kinds of different things related to trauma and recovery and physical health. And I'm a big music fan and books, so there's a little bit of that mixed in there. And it is Tim Lineaweaver, Lineaweaver.com. I know
Mm.
that's quite a mouthful, but that's how you find me.
Excellent. Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on today, sharing your amazing journey and just, how far you've come. I just think it's so inspirational, and I'm sure my listeners will be thinking that too. And, listeners, yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't mind if they've got any questions or queries. Then, yeah.
Absolutely. That's another function of the website. If you have a question or anything at all, there you can there's a button on there. You can hit the button and send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to take any questions. I love to do that, and if I can help people in any way, I'm happy to do so.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. So reach out, everybody, if you are struggling right now and you do need some support or a helping hand to start you on your way, on your journey, then I'm sure, Tim would love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
Amazing. But that's all we have time for today, my beautiful people. I look forward to seeing you on the next show. Take care. Stay blessed.